Okay, thanks for joining. I have a scripture thought that I wanted to share with you that I came across the other day. And it was one of those where it once again shows that the power of the Book of Mormon, how the Book of Mormon adds clarification and power and gives glory to the Bible. I was reading through the New Testament, Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 and 2. It says, "Now these are the words which Jesus taught his disciples, that they should say unto the people, Judge not unrighteously, that ye be not judged, but judge righteous judgment." And that's actually the Joseph Smith translation of that verse. And then a connecting verse really just adds further insight and starts with the word therefore. So it's almost as if, here's what Jesus said, therefore here's what we do. And this is Alma speaking to one of his sons, verse 14, chapter 41, verse 14. "Therefore, my son, see that you are merciful unto your brethren. Deal justly, judge righteously, and do good continually. And if you do all these things, then shall you receive your reward. Yea, you shall have mercy restored unto you again. You shall have justice restored unto you again. Judgment restored unto you again. Rewarded unto you again. For that which ye do send out shall return unto you again and be restored." So just thinking of that verse again, the law of the harvest, right? What we send out returns unto us, and adding upon the words of the Savior to do not judge unrighteously, but to deal justly, judge righteously, and do good continually. So just an invitation from the prophet Alma for you. Well, right at the end of the semester, believe it or not. I don't know if it's gone fast or slow or,
Depends on what week we're talking about.
Depends on the topic and the assignment and if you're a group leader or not. Yeah, definitely.
Today it seems okay, but other weeks it might have seemed a little slower.
Good. Yeah, that happens for sure. Well, good. Thanks for your cooperation with the final. The link for some reason isn't working, so representatives are aware of that. So if it gets fixed, great. If not, just plan on emailing me or your final responses, and if that's all right.
Okay.
So that's kind of the main. Any questions or concerns as we get started here?
No, not really.
Just wrapping up, huh?
Yep. I'll probably email it because I'm probably going to try to do it tonight or tomorrow just because I'm leaving to travel up there tomorrow.
Awesome. That's
Are you
exciting.
graduating,
Good.
Norman?
Yep.
All right. I might see you there.
Congratulations.
Oh, good.
We're graduating.
Where are you at?
I'm in Southern California.
Oh, so you got a big trip.
Yeah, we've got 3 kids up in the Salt Lake area, so we'll see them on Saturday and Sunday and then go spend a couple days in Yellowstone and head over to graduation.
That's awesome.
Yep, it's been a long 4 years.
Well, congratulations.
You too.
So what's your major?
Business administration.
You feel like you're ready?
Yeah. Yeah,
Good.
I've actually looked into a couple of master's programs already, but I think I'm going to take a year off. It's just been, like I said, really, really tough the last 4 years. Working full time. Yeah, working full time, going to school full time, and pretty challenging calling. So, yeah.
Wow.
It's not easy. It's quite the feat. So congrats to both of you and all or close to it. There's a lot of you there. You're all either graduating or really close to it. So All right, well, we'll just jump into some discussion. I think the final and the point we're at in the semester allows us to kind of look back together, learned and anyway with the doohickeys projects. On that, by the way, this semester, all doohickeys work has been great. This is a strong class, so all of you and your groups have worked together well and done great as far as I can. This week, kind of an inner place in society. So I don't know, how you view that in your mind, but it's kind of the statement of, yep, we have work, but we have our lives outside of work, and life work and comes into work for the best and what we have to manage. So, anything jumped out new to you guys? Anything that you've learned this week?
The big thing that I'm kind of questioning as I'm looking at the material and reading some of the, current things, I, read a few articles about companies that are giving unlimited vacation time, and then the article about flex time working from home. And I just kind of want to ask you, is it just me from a generational standpoint? Because I'm 50 and I don't know if I could trust myself, let alone trust other employees. I've had businesses and, like commission salespeople, if they want to work from home, work an hour a day or work 20 hours a day, it really didn't matter to me. But for an hourly person, like I said, I don't know if it's a generational thing, or I just really wouldn't trust them to be as effective and efficient at home as they would in an office.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I've had similar feelings. Could be generated. I'm not sure, and I don't know what but some of them are putting points in there about this works. Having remote workers works best. You set up a certain way, or these are the things for parameters on it, because definitely trust. Can the work get done effectively? What work are you doing? I think there's some variation there, and some of it's preference. I actually work for a company. We have a lot of work at home, but for me, I do well being able to leave the house, go to work, leave work, and come home and not be working while I'm at home. So I don't know. It's becoming more prevalent, telecommuting, and I think it has its advantages and its drawbacks for sure.
Do you have any telecommuters at your work?
I do, yeah. We have quite a few. So the company I work for is pretty large, and there's a lot of the back office function, our timekeeping, our payroll team and things like that. They work from home.
That works out well?
Not all of them, but a lot of them do, yeah.
My boss. At the job,
sorry, go ahead. From home,
So if the job gets done, I guess you learn to trust them, and then it works out okay, right?
Yeah, I think that you have to. There's some challenges. She commented one time. She's like, "I like when you guys, when we touch base daily, and interact and staff meetings and stuff, because she doesn't have people around her that she's interacting with. It's all virtual, pretty much. So." She's like, sometimes it's kind of lonely.
Yeah, that's what the one boss said in the one article about flex time, that she just couldn't work from home. It would, she needs the interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So I wondered, how do you find a job that is like that? Because I don't see them advertised as a job like that, but like you, I'm hearing that it happens. I know even with BYUI, when I've called my advisor, she works from home.
Mm.
So I just wondered, how do you hear about those kinds of positions?
I think, you can search for them. If you get on Indeed.com and search for or work at home or see a lot of job postings up there. I have a friend that mom, but she works from home in the hotel industry. I think she is for hotels from her home. For service type positions, you see work at home. The company I work for is a call center industry, and so we have a lot of work at home or tech support agents that home.
So like Norman talked
there are
about.
drawbacks.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Norman was talking about the office, the virtual office article we read. So I think that was the one that talked about the big open office of Twitter. That was a different article. But is that becoming more prevalent? And what can you tell me about that? It sounded really different to me.
It's kind of how things evolve, because the last 5 years that's been kind of I have an open office like all these tech companies, and here the advantage is why now 3 to 6 months I'm seeing articles saying that, hey, this is why this isn't as effective as we thought. You start to see it trend kind of the other direction.
I think it would be really difficult to work in a situation like that.
I don't know how you guys are, but I'm able to zone off. How it was kind of an open floor environment, but taking phone calls and that way, but now close the door and hunker down. So
it seems like it would be really distracting.
I wonder, the articles and the reading goes of it as far as discussing what's it good for. Do you think there's some positives that you see feeling on that?
It could unify the group. They would have more possibilities of collaboration and interacting with one another, and I can see positive in that. But it depends on what the work is, really. But if it's something you just need to get done, it just seems like seeing everybody could be really distracting. To me, it reminds me of, if you sit in the front benches at church, you're more likely to hear the speaker. If you sit on the back benches, you're more likely to be watching everybody because they're very distracting.
Mm-hmm. But what happens when a family sits in your usual bench? Uh-oh.
Right?
No, it's true. I think it's good for the collaboration. It's good for the, if you're generating ideas, if you've got a creative effort that's happening, it allows for that. Other types of work, it might not fit. So I don't know if it's opinion, but we got to do what works for what you're trying to accomplish. That applies in a lot of things that we do. Kind of when we're same thing as when we're talking about, we have to do a training or give a lesson or whatever it might be. sometimes we get so concerned about the delivery and how we're going to train, what we're trying to accomplish, what outcome are we working towards. If you establish the what first, then the how kind of comes together. And so when you're creating an office environment, I think if you're outcome focused, I think that's great. I'm trying to think. We had a state council meeting, and a few weeks ago, we usually have that in the high council room, so everybody's around the table. However, the building was occupied that week or under construction or something, and so we met in a Relief Society room. The chairs were in rows, but when we got in there, we ended up having the chairs in a half circle. And that made a big difference. We thought we started the other way, but we moved into a half circle because the outcome we want is, and the discussion and, the counseling together. I don't know. Have you seen that? Have you seen that concept? Focusing on the how before we focus on the what?
Yeah, maybe we're just, we get into habits of doing things, or that's just the way it's always done, and so you're reluctant to try something different or do something that done differently.
That's true. Yeah, we're resistant to some of those changes for sure.
But then you always have to say, well, there's probably a pretty good reason why it's been done that way for a long time.
Yep.
There's not necessarily a reason to change something just for the sake of changing it. So.
And that's a good point. We get a little change happy sometimes.
But didn't I hear you just say that after they did the open floor plans, now they're starting to say maybe they don't work as well as they originally thought?
I've seen articles that are arguing against it. So, and that's the other thing to watch for is, can we be conclusive about that type of, crises or, in different areas or what, group or team or organization has to it. And so a meeting environment in a production environment or a manufacturing environment, you're going to whereas if you're a magazine publisher, you're going to want more of that openness. So that's what I struggle with a little bit in this idea. I think to discuss, and it's a topic in our class for a reason, because there's has changed a lot about collaborating and team building and creative. Whereas some of it's always worked. If it isn't broke, don't fix it type of thing. Hard to generalize, but gets us thinking about the fact that we can do things to
Different
make things
ways
better if it helps our outcome. But if we're just changing something and we don't know why, I think that's the problem.
That makes sense.
Oh, I don't know. I just thought it was a good idea. So
HR read something in a magazine and they were like, oh, let's try that.
Exactly. That'll be great.
I found,
but yeah, you run into that.
I spent several years working at an elementary school, and there's a natural opportunity for making changes at the end of each school year, or the beginning of the next. And there was many times that the principal would say, okay, this year we're going to do something different. We're going to do it like this. And she would make some changes. And then we would do that for the whole year. And then we would talk about it and evaluate what worked, what didn't work. And she would get all our feedback. And then the next year, she would either make some changes, but maybe keep some things. But it gave them a natural opportunity. Do businesses have, I guess, like at the beginning of the year, but when would they, like school years have school years, but when do other businesses have a natural opportunity to make changes?
Okay, yeah, and so she sought feedback, wasn't off the cuff about it, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's important.
Well, we
with
have,
this, go ahead, Norman.
yeah, we have fiscal years that we just started our new fiscal year July 1st, and so that pretty much revolves around budgets. So towards the end of the year, like it was pretty hot. Our office doesn't have air conditioning, and I had like $1,400 left in the office supplies budget. So we went out and bought 2 of those portable air conditioners. So,
Oh, nice.
I mean, I don't think that's not really kind of focused on, making big policy changes. But, I think that is a good time because we do budget prep and budget review to look at what we need to do the next year. And so that does open up opportunities for policy changes or, increasing uniform allowances or, things like that. So, we do kind of look at things at the beginning of that fiscal year.
Comments, there's that element of time frame. Here there's going to be opportunity to evaluate and reevaluate. I think that's important. Because that's kind of a time to look at your resources. How did things go? What can we do this time for a fresh start? So
I'm wondering if I can ask your opinion as our instructor to help us understand a little more about those workplace society issues that come up. Some of them are a little, I guess you'd say, more clear, like substance abuse. There's probably pretty much 0 to low tolerance for that, and probably people will just be escorted out. But there's some of the others are a little bit more ambivalent. It's a little harder to know. I mean, we discussed in our groups, but give us some of your feedback, your thoughts about how some of those things come up, what it looks like, and how it gets handled.
I'm sure, in some of your experiences. So, and you mentioned abuse, drug and alcohol. That's the number one. And I definitely see that. Drugs, alcohol, too. So,
say that again.
I just threw prescription drugs in there and into that category.
Okay.
Yeah, employees using that, or they say, "Hey, I left my," and somebody stole it. Difficult things like that. So, that is a little more cut and dried. Where usually there's a policy to say, "Hey, you shouldn't be at work under the influence." Reviewed medication at work, stuff like that. But that is the number one issue. So it's definitely important to have policy and procedure in place for those issues. You're really taking care of your customers. You're being safe. All those things. Some other issues, and bring the ones up that come to mind for you. Issues at home. Divorce is a big one. Relationship issues. At all levels of an organization, our frontline employees up to our supervisors, managers, and above. If we try to leave things separate, but if we're having trouble at home, it can really affect our Norman, the people that you manage.
Not really, because we're pretty small. The thing we've had to do recently, not necessarily for any of our employees, but just policy-wise with legalized marijuana in California. And, you know, basically our legal people have told us you really have to kind of treat it like alcohol, where if an employee goes home and uses marijuana in the evening, comes to work and isn't exhibiting anything like if he came to work drunk, then you have to just treat it kind of like alcohol. And, you know, as long as they're not, you know, coming to work high or drunk, then your policy really has to reflect that. So, and it's interesting because even our legal people have been saying that they passed the law and nobody really knows until it's tested. You know, somebody gets in an accident and then you send them for drug testing and they have marijuana in their system. So you fire them, but they say, well, it's legal. You know, I smoked it 2 days ago and it's still in my system. You know, it's in your system for 30 days. And so they really don't know what policies to put into place to deal with that because those cases haven't been taken through the courts and have the courts say, okay, well, you can't fire them or you can, or, you know, because it's not like alcohol that, you know, is if you're drunk, you can test it right there. If you've used marijuana in the last 30 days, it'll show up in a drug test. So it's a situation that's really in flux, and like I said, with a few number of employees, it's not really an issue. But I can see, you know, larger companies in California, they're probably going to have to confront that issue with an employee if they haven't already.
Well, that's a great topic. Yeah, running into similar situations in Colorado, you know, where it's legal, and other states that are bringing that forward. Go ahead, Lorinda.
So even if a state has legalized marijuana, can a company still have a company policy that it's not allowed? And
Yeah.
if it is found, they can be terminated?
Yep, they definitely should have a policy in place. And like Norman said, it's similar to alcohol. So, you know, I can't come to work under the influence. So, you know, drunk or high or whatever. But that's interesting because there have been many times, you know, on my vantage point where a team leader or a manager will come and say, hey, so-and-so, it seems like they're, you know, they got red eyes, they kind of stink. I think they're drunk. You know, and so my coaching point there is, it's like, okay, you know, we can't base it off smell. You know, we don't know the scenario there. Smell can stick with you. They could have, you know, we can take into consideration some maybe red eyes, but really what we got to look for is clearly impaired behavior. And then from there, it's a conversation with me and a manager to assess if they, you know, are under the influence, and if so, we test them. But the challenge lies in kind of what Norma was saying. If you test somebody and it was, you know, and it was negative, you've got to be pretty sure that they're under the influence if you're going to test somebody. Otherwise, it comes across as accusatory and creates a whole bunch of other issues. But
as well as the expense.
Yeah, and the expense. So it's a challenge. And the marijuana, that's definitely complicates it because it stays in your system so long. It stays in your hair. You know, how do you handle that? That's something we're going to have to figure out.
It just seems to me like a company could have its own policy, irregardless of the state. And if the company has a policy that you cannot come under that influence, and if anything happens at work that would cause a drug testing, even if they hadn't used it for 2 weeks, if it's in their system, that would still be grounds for termination if that was the company policy.
Yeah.
Right? Can a company have a policy that is stricter than the state?
Well, I think, it depends on the situation. I think with Norman's example, if they get injured, for example, somebody gets injured, you drug test them, and it'd be circumstantial that you found that. But the problem is you can't tell if that person was using marijuana that day during work. It could have been 3 weeks ago. Alcohol, yeah, you can tell. If I was under the influence, I had the alcohol on my breath, or you would know that I was using it inappropriately. So it's a gray area there. But yeah, company policy can, in some cases, override. So a little bit different example of that is a weapons policy. So Idaho, for example, has open carry laws, but company policy says no weapons in the building or on the property. So I get those questions. Well, I have open carry. It's open carry. Great, but don't open carry at work because we have company policy. Does that make sense?
Right. So that's really a good example. And the main difference is that marijuana stays in your blood for that long versus a weapon or alcohol is short term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, those are big issues. Other ones that come to mind, relationship issues, divorce, family issues come up. Another one, at least in my experience, has been PTSD. Anxiety, emotional difficulty that people have. That's a big one. We actually hire a number of veterans where I work, and a lot of them deal with the PTSD, and it's a customer service job. And as long as they are managing that and getting the help they need, and they know what their triggers are, they do just fine. But we have had instances, for example, where we have a gentleman that's a year and a half ago was over in Iraq, protecting lives, protecting his own life, getting shot at, and now he's sitting at a desk getting yelled at by a customer because their TV isn't working. So for them, it's like, wait a minute, what? And it can affect them, and sometimes they'll respond adversely to those situations. So we've seen a lot of that, and usually they do great, especially if they have the treatment they need. They are self-managing. If they're going up to the VA clinic, they have a lot of support for that. So seen a lot of that one. Done some training on that one. And then just relationship issues. So it's kind of weird. I feel bad about this, but it just tells you how important our relationships are. We have 4 operations managers, and in 3.5 years, let's see, 4 operations managers, and in 3 years, I've seen 3 of them get divorced.
Well, you don't want that job.
No, it's like, what's happening?
Is it the job or is it them?
Well, I don't think it's the job. I think they work. They're not overworking. Their teams are running well. Coincidentally, these people, they just I think it's just that view of marriage that we see today, that it gets difficult, so I'm going to just get out of it. And so I don't know all the factors. These people aren't members of the church, or really none of them are like religious, except for maybe one. But it's just been interesting, and maybe some of it's just coincidental, but been interesting to see that.
I can tell you, because I've been through divorce, that even though you try to keep your work and your home life separate, it permeates every corner of your life. It's not anything you forget about, and it does make it so that you're more easily distracted and, maybe not all there, because you're trying to think, court date's coming up, what do I need to get ready, or, where's my child, are they okay? There's just all kinds of issues related to that it's a very difficult thing, and I went through a divorce when I had a supervisor who was very supportive and helpful and understanding. And there was a few occasional opportunities when she gave me to, visit with her about what was going on, or she would ask me, how are things going? And it made me feel good that she cared enough to ask, but yet she also helped me remember that, okay, now it's time to go back to work, and set that aside for a little while. And so I'm actually still in contact with her several years later, and she's moved into 2 or 3 different states, and so have I. And it's pretty cool that we've managed to stay in contact, and it's meant a lot that she was sincerely interested, not just putting up with me.
Well, that's great. And do you think that manager had a good balance of being supportive but still being your boss? How did she go about that?
Well, we were in a special needs classroom, and that lent itself to, what do I say, lots of confidentiality and learning to trust one another. And, I wasn't telling all my coworkers because it was pretty much one-on-one. I wasn't telling everybody what was going on. But because she would ask me when others weren't around, like maybe we were at recess or at lunch or, outside when we're waiting for the bus, she would always ask me at very appropriate times when there was no students and no other coworkers, when I could just say something, but we both knew, oh, the kids are coming off the bus, that conversation's over now. And, it was good because she didn't only ask me once. I worked with her for that whole school year, and she asked me several times. And she was very kind to my daughter, who was, caught in the middle of this. And she was just awesome.
Oh, good. No, thanks for sharing that, because it does come up, and so there is a balance. And I've had discussions on this before where, we need to provide support avenues for people at work, and we should have good resources available. And a lot of companies, for example, they'll have an employee assistance program or resources available on top of that. So anytime you can help employees help themselves, that can be great. And then a good manager should at least be aware of what's going on, just to try.
So I'm reading about that, and I'm wondering, how confidential are those? I've worried at times, like, don't connect with them because it might jeopardize your job. How does that work?
Oh, you mean like an EAP?
Mm-hmm.
I researched those for the doohickey, and I found out some really interesting things. Number one, they said, like, I was researching how to set it up, like for the doohickey company. And one of the things that they said is you really want to use a third-party company that's not affiliated with your company, so not an internal one, because then employees are more confident about the confidentiality. And you treat it much like a healthcare program. So maybe for your healthcare, you might offer Kaiser and Blue Shield and another one. And so then you do the same thing with your EAP program. So you just contract with a company to do it. And I was surprised at how cheap it was. They said it averages somewhere between $20 and $40 per employee per year. And so, depending on how many employees you have, that's really not that much. Probably the reason why it's so cheap is how few employees take advantage of it. I know when I worked for Rockwell, a pretty big company, they advertised quite a bit, posters around the plant and things like that for the EAP program. And, if you were having a problem, your supervisor would say, hey, why don't you call the EAP program, because, they'll give you some counseling sessions, they'll do, and since it's a third party, nobody tells your supervisor, hey, this person's, you know, doing a outpatient rehab program or something like that. It's kept pretty confidential.
So do the supervisors even know that you're utilizing the program?
I don't think so. It's kind of like when you go to the doctor, you know, your supervisor doesn't, you know, other than if you need time off or whatever, but yeah, they typically wouldn't be advised or told about somebody that's seeking treatment or seeking help for personal issues.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, that's good information. Yeah, all the ones I've had are third party. So.
Do they have one where you are?
Yep, we do. It's through Unum, and you know, it's a 24-hour-a-day phone call line, and there's also a website with a ton of helpful information. So I've used that, you know, to share stuff with people, and a lot of people call. So, but it's still like Norman said, it's still not very widely used. So I think the cost just gets distributed pretty widely. So it's very affordable.
I think the figure that I read was only somewhere between 2 and 5%.
I was going to say 5 or 6%.
Yeah, employees use a EAP program in a particular year.
Yeah, so it can be helpful. So all kinds of things, you know, can come into play, and I think the most important thing is to be supportive, but help people continue to be able to work. A lot of people, I'm telling that to, if they have a struggle, you know, we have a lot of employees that just have a ton going on at home, and they've got anxiety, and their, you know, life at home is kind of miserable. And I say to them, well, work can be a place of stability for you, believe it or not. You know, let it be a stable thing in your life. So don't remove that. You know, come to work. You know, in the short term, they might need some accommodation and some support or time off or whatever. But over time, it's work that remains the stable force in their life. So it can be a helpful thing for people. So pretty fascinating.
You know, you reminded me of something I was going to ask you. When I mentioned Rockwell, they had and I had no idea what it is. You might know. Do you know what a corporate ombudsman hotline is?
Oh, ombudsman. I've heard that word.
I think it might be like for whistleblowers or something. It kind of like that hotline might go to the corporate legal team or something. If you see something going wrong in the company, you're supposed to call.
Yeah, I wonder if that's like so the definition, just looking at that word, an official appointed to investigate individuals' complaints against maladministration, especially that of public authorities. So yeah, whistleblower would fit into that. Probably see that in union environments. Well, that would be kind of like the union leader type of thing. Grievance, a grievance line. So now that you mention that, you know, in my company we have corporate security hotline. So you know, you can complain to HR, but if you want to complain anonymously, you can go through the hotline, even though it comes back to me anyways. But it's just an avenue for people to complain or give grievance.
So in our group, we have a situation that we discussed that I would like to throw out there and get you guys' thoughts on it.
Okay.
One of our people said they worked at a place where there was a young man who was working who was very open about the fact he was gay, and he came to work and began showing inappropriate pictures of his life to workers and girls, and it didn't matter. He just shared with everybody, but everybody was scared to say anything because they were afraid that there would be the allegation of, you know, discrimination if they were to tell the boss, hey, this is what's going on, it's bothering me. And so anyway, I throw the situation out. I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts on that.
All right.
You know, from this perspective.
What do you think, Norman?
Yeah, I think inappropriate behavior is inappropriate behavior, and you know, I think there are a few legitimate reasons. You mentioned PTSD, and you know, I've had some experience with that just from an outside point, where somebody used that as an excuse for some other behavior. And I don't know enough about PTSD to know whether that's a valid excuse or not. Um, but you know, there's other conditions, like I think it's Tourette's, where somebody can just you know, say a swear word, and they can't control it. So I think there's a few exceptions, but I think for the most part, I think most companies have pretty good policies about inappropriate behavior. And you know, regardless of your sexual orientation, I think it's really a company really has a responsibility to provide a safe working environment, and that includes not being subjected to things that you would deem inappropriate from a sexual nature or from a bullying or you know, anything like that. So companies really have to take it seriously. I think they're probably more liable for not addressing it than any type of sexual discrimination claim that might result from this guy.
But how do you get the other workers to feel comfortable enough to tell the manager? Because that was part of the problem, is everybody was afraid to say anything. Even though they knew it was wrong, it was inappropriate, it was uncomfortable, it was awkward, but nobody knew how to deal with it.
It can be challenging. I think my thought there, though, is a company, your culture is built around what the behaviors that you reinforce, and it's also built around the worst behavior that you're willing to allow. And so it comes down to modeling the way. Your leadership has to model the way. You have to have policy in place. Leadership needs to model the way, and you train your people, you know, what we're going to focus on and what we're going to hold ourselves accountable to. And you know, harassment is harassment. We can't create a hostile work environment and then keep quiet about it and expect it to get better. That's on each of us, personal accountability to contribute our best to the culture, and so we've got to model the way so that people are comfortable talking and really protecting their selves. There's no help.
Are there anonymous ways that employees could talk to a manager or get a message to a manager?
Put it in an envelope and slip it under their door.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, but I think what you mentioned, Brother Stanley, that is a symptom of a management issue where managers aren't aware of what's happening with employees, then managers aren't being good managers. So
yep. It does happen. I've had situations where, well, let's see, about a year and a half ago, had a situation. A gal came forward with a complaint about someone harassing her, and asked the question, "How long has this been going on?" And she said, 2 months. Wow. So, and it turns out there were 6 or 7 other people that this was affecting, and yeah, it was just kind of a, happening over in the corner, and nobody was addressing it. So HR gets to.
So, there's always somebody who's going to be a problem, right?
Yep, there's always challenges. So.
What about dating in the workplace? How do you handle that?
Sorry, you cut out. What was that?
Dating in the workplace. How do you handle that?
Often, and have fun with it. No, I'm just kidding.
Tell people don't to do it. No, they can. There should be some policy there in place too. And from my vantage, or from my experience, there's issues, especially if a manager is dating someone that reports to them or indirectly reports to them, because it creates other issues, timekeeping fraud, nepotism, stuff like that. Favoritism, I mean.
We had one of our people in our group use that as one of his examples. He works at the BYU Idaho tech support, the call center or whatever, and he said that the issue with that is you're spending a lot of time with other college age students, and attractions can happen, and a couple of people started dating, but it really turned into a problem, just a big distraction, and they ended up having to put one of them on one side of the room and one on the other side of the room. And when that still didn't solve it, I think they put them on different shifts or something like that. But he said it was a big distraction, not just for them, but because they would put their phones on not available or something, I guess. So other people were having to pick up the slack, and people were having to wait for their tech support to be answered. So
yeah, it's tough, and I think so. In that scenario, could they date? Yeah, but it's affecting the work, and that's what you coach. So we've got 2 managers that are getting along really well right now. So it's created some issues, like, oh, you're at lunch for way too long and you're gone at the same time. We've got to address that. So yep, it's fun.
Yeah, I had an issue with potential nepotism, kind of. I don't know. It was just weird. It was right after I started as general manager. Our admin secretary retired, and so I was hiring for another one. And it's a really small community, and the jobs there are pretty coveted. And one of our best field technicians, his wife applied for the administrative secretary position. And he asked me before she applied, could she apply? And I looked at district policies, and there wasn't any policy that said she couldn't. And, he wouldn't be supervising her, I would be. And I kind of had to take it kind of like a case by case. I thought, I know him and I kind of know her, and I think she could be very professional, and I know that he wouldn't be hanging out in the office talking to his wife all day. He'd be out in the field working. So I went forward that, well, if she's the most qualified and gets hired, then I'm fine with that. And he was very good about not, hey, Norm, can you really look at my wife, because we need the income for our family. He didn't say anything at all. So I was really happy with that, and she was in the top 3, but we ended up hiring somebody else who's worked out fantastic. But with that community events and things like that, I see her, and it's a little awkward, because I don't think they expected it. But anyway, it's all around. It's a difficult situation, even if it's optimal like that was.
Mm-hmm. It's challenging. I don't think a manager who's paying attention, like you were, I don't think they'd ever be a fan of that, because it's just another layer of complexity that could unravel there. So
I have to say, this class has taught me a whole new perspective that I didn't know before. Mm-hmm. And it's been great. It's helped me to understand things from the employer's position, manager's position, in a way that I just never thought of, didn't understand before. And so I just want to say thank you for how you helped us to learn this.
Well, of course. Well, thank you for that feedback, and I'm glad it's been a helpful course. It's a lot of fun.
It's been helpful for me in that it's given me some additional tools. And in my job, we don't have HR. It's me and the administrative secretary taking care of payroll and paperwork and things like that. And I'm fine with that. I would not want to do HR full time. It's okay as a portion of my job, but yeah, I'm just not the HR type.
Yeah, we're a little crazy. So, well, good. No, I'm glad it's beneficial. Yeah, it's, if you're in management, for sure, you're doing HR thinking, and making those decisions. So hopefully, it continues to guide you and help you. Have you learned, with our learning model, has it connected with anything for you spiritually?
Yeah, I have some, I don't know, it's hard for me to separate, and I really don't try to separate my spiritual life from my work life, from my school life. My administrative secretary, she used to be religious, but now she's describes herself as just spiritual. She's kind of been turned off by religion, but we've had some really good philosophical and religious conversations. She's asked a lot about the church and things. But as far as, yeah, I don't know. It's, in my calling, I take calls at work sometimes, board members, and so I don't know. I really, some people really like to have defined areas, and I just, I think consciously try not to have any barriers or lines, or, well, I'm not at church now, I can do this, or I'm not at work, I can do this. So I just try to be the same person. So,
Well, that's good. Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's the mission, and that's the learning model. Truth is truth, secular or spiritual, and we should be on the same track no matter what we're doing. So, no, there's value in that. Appreciate that.
When you read that scripture tonight, it made me think about performance reviews. You were talking about judging, and I thought, and in one of our articles, it talked about it's just as hard for the person who's having to make the judgment as it is for the one who's worried about being judged. And I hadn't thought of it that way before, but I can see how the scriptures relate to work that way. I can see the importance of using the church leaders' guidance about how to be a good leader and how that can spill over into the workplace. The importance of integrity and honesty. And if you utilize that in your work, then it's going to make everything better about you. I find that there are a few people that when you go to visit their place of business, though they're a member of the church, you wouldn't know it, because they completely do separate it, and they perhaps handle their business in a way that you would be a little surprised, like, whoa, really? And I feel like I've learned things in this class that helps me remember, like Norman says, be transparent, be the same here and there, and just let that be who you are.
I love it.
I've appreciated when you've had your spiritual thoughts, and the daily bread, man, I needed that right then.
Oh, that's a great talk. Yeah,
that's a really good one.
Well, good. Thank you. Yeah, you both have brought out a message for everybody this evening. Be the same. Be consistent, and integrity is a great word for that. And I think that's what the Lord wants us to do, is be the same, be consistent, be a disciple, and we can do that in any setting, right? And that's what I think that's the biggest thing I learned over and over in this class, is that the Lord is who he is because of true principles. And if we incorporate true principles into our lives, we can become better. And I think so much, and I've mentioned it a few times, I think so much about section 121 of the Doctrine and Covenants. You know, kindness and pure knowledge and love unfeigned, reproving betimes with sharpness when moved upon by the Holy Ghost, and showing forth afterwards an increase in love. We can lead effectively if we try to be that way. And we can be direct, we can be very clear, but we can do so with love. And so I have a testimony of that, that everything we learn it connects. And so I'm excited that you're graduating. Congratulations. I know that's got to feel good. But remember and keep in mind the learning model. It's set up for forever for you guys, post-graduation too, to help us all be lifelong learners. And I think the biggest thing I picked up from school is to learn how to learn. And it's become a passion of mine, because I think learning definitely is a principle of salvation. So just keep on going.
Can I ask you one quick question?
Sure.
I'm trying to gather opinions. I've been looking at master's programs and master's in public administration, and there's anything from a $72,000 program at USC down to a $10,000 program at Arkansas State. Is there any reason to get a bigger name master's degree?
And this would be my opinion. I think, those big names, you pay so much money. And I think what you look at is not just the name, but what the program is centered around. And a lot of programs, are more rigorous than others about working to place their students into jobs after that. So you can kind of look at that placement rate, look where previous students have ended up out in the work field. Do they go out and get internships and grow in their careers? Or are they just charging a bunch of money because they have a college name to them? So that's what I looked at. So for example, my program was through Utah State. Pretty cost effective. It was a good format for me as well. A satellite program, so I was able to work full time and still complete that. Wanted to do something that fit well with my family, but also it had a great focus on HR and to really actually let it grow into a career. And I don't know if I was clear on that. So the name, it isn't just in the name, but in the efforts that the school is going to make for you as a student, if that makes sense.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm just trying to get a few different opinions.
Yeah, but public administration, that'd be great. I considered that, and actually, it's great for management. I think you work in the public sector, is that right?
Yeah, I manage a water district, and I think I'd really like to be like a city manager.
Okay, cool.
And I think it would really dovetail with the experience I have, but I think for the most part, depending on how big the city is, you're probably going to need a master's degree. So,
well, good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So it would be a balance between the accreditation of the school, kind of their placement activities, and the format of the program. If it's going to work for you and your family and your job and everything else going on. So.
Okay, thanks.
You bet. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Well, thank you both.
Just thanks so much.
You bet.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you guys too. Good to work with you, and keep in touch if you'd like. And best of luck to what you do next.
All right. You too.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.